My name is Shyam Kishore. Today I am going to relate an incident which occurred about 15 years back. I was about 7 years old and studying in 3rd standard. One day when I returned from school, I found my mother writhing in pain. Looking at the way she was crying, I was terrified and shocked. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Soon I called all my aunts in the neighborhood, and even they were distressed to see her in such a bad condition. Immediately they sent someone to call my father who had gone to work. And by 4 o'clock he came and we all went to our family doctor. He suspected something serious and referred my mom to a specialist. The specialist confirmed that my mother was suffering from appendicitis. The appendix had burst open and the poison had spread throughout the body. She was immediately admitted to the hospital, and within a matter of few minutes, she was in the operation theatre and was operated upon. There was little I could do except crying. I got to see her 15 days later, and believe me, she was looking 10 years old. I was totally shocked, so shocked that I couldn't answer her when she tried to speak to me. This was for the first time I understood that how bad some diseases could be. She stayed in the hospital for 45 long days, and during her stay there, she was not allowed to eat a single morsel of food or drink a single drop of water. All the time she was hooked onto glucose bottles. During that time, I was all alone at home. My dad was with me, but he had to go to office and also to the hospital. I simply used to sit on the windowsill waiting for my dad to come and tell me everything about the hospital and my mother. Later on, the doctor said that had we been 5 minutes late, my mother would have died. It was literally a second life for her and also for me, because I could never think of myself without her. The day she returned home, I was the happiest person in my life.
I'm Chavi Arora. In almost everybody's life, there comes a time when one is depressed and dissatisfied. I have also gone through such a phase. At that time, I realized that I should look beyond myself. I should work for needy people, the people who are deprived of love, affection, family, and home. So I decided to work with an orphanage called Palna. From 1st of January 1993, I started working with the children of Palna. I used to teach them, play with them, and tell them stories. Every day was a new experience for me. It was an experience of increasing love, affection, and happiness. That experience was really satisfying. For them, I was their elder sister. I used to tell them about my family, and they used to think that my parents are their mummy papa, and my brother sister are their didi and bhaiya. They always wanted to meet my family. On the other hand, when I told about them to my family, they also got very interested in meeting them. So once I decided to call them at my home for lunch. I thought that would be the best way for them to meet my family. Deciding what they wanted to eat was not an option available to them in everyday life. So I told them to decide what they want to eat. They got very enthusiastic and gave me a list of number of dishes. Finally, on 7th of Feb, I called them. I went to pick them up, and they were very happy. They were very excited. When they met my parents, you should have seen the joy and happiness in their eyes. Seeing the different dishes, seeing the variety of dishes, they got very. Seeing the variety of dishes of their own choice, they were on top of the world. A small dessert, a simple dessert like chocolate cake with vanilla ice cream, they got really fascinated by it. At that time I realized that what people meant by saying the joy of life is to share and is To share is to care. But all good things come to an end, and so did our time together. But the time we have shared will always remain etched in my memory, because today, even if I want, I can't repeat it, since they are not, since they have been adopted and they have moved to the foreign lands. Thank you.
I'm Deepak Shetty. I was a shy boy, very reserved, very meek. People, they could easily take advantage of me. Today, if I can stand before you and talk to you with a little bit of courage and conviction, it's all due to one person, and he is my father. The major problem that we had initially was, we had a small estate and Dad wasn't earning much. I used to go to school and I was at a very impressionable age. I used to see my friends there. They used to come in big cars, play video games and all that. Like when you're very small, like a natural small boy, I used to get confused. I used to wonder, like why is it not possible for me? When I came home, Mom sometimes she used to lose her cool, and that's quite natural probably, you all know it. She would be frustrated. But Dad, he would take me to his side, he would explain things to me. And this process with intermingling with Dad, talking with him, has surely made me a much more confident person. And during this time, my elder brother, he was sent to Mangalore to stay with his grandparents, and my smaller brother, he was a kid. He didn't know what was happening. So I was alone during the time, and if not for him, I would have been a wreck. With the passing of time, Dad's estate improved, and probably with his workload being more, I couldn't spend much time with him. But even then, he's one person to whom I could always confide in. Like even if I had a girlfriend, I could always go and tell him. He would understand what the problems were. 2 or 3 years back, there was a small lump started forming on Dad's left chest. Like he used to laugh it off. He used to say nothing, there's no problem as such. But myself and Mom, we could really notice that there was a major problem in this. He used to always keep feeling it. He used to keep reserved and keep him to himself. We asked a local doctor. He said most probably this growth, it's cancerous. Like, I can't tell you what the feeling was then. I nearly went mad. I was an absolute psych person. Mom also, she really started losing her cool. We conducted a lot of pujas. Mom, she had a lot of belief in all this and all that was going on. And then we had to take him to Bangalore, like the experts advised her that we have to take Dad to Bangalore. Every minute of her journey was torture. Like there in Bangalore, he was put in a big medical center and a lot of tests and all were going on. This is the time I really realized my intensity, my love, my affection for him. I also used to think that there's a power called God above us. Like I used to realize, now if he's going to take him away, there's nothing such as love and as God. I would have done anything for that matter to keep him with me. After a lot of tests and all, the doctors came to a conclusion that it was not very harmful and that it can be treated. It was still in the initial stages. After around 2.5 to 3 months, he was completely cured. It was without doubt the most memorable day in my life. Friends, what I would like to tell you is this. We have friends, we have colleagues, but when it comes to the crux, it's the family which stands behind us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Franklin K. Thomas. July 1983, 10:30 p.m. People swarm out of Alankar Theatre. Among the swarming people, a 12-year-old boy with his family. The 12-year-old boy couldn't find his family members. As my friends, that 12-year-old boy was me. I was an Amitabh Bachchan fan right from my school days. So I insisted upon my parents to take me for his latest movie, Namak Halal. After the movie got over, I proceeded towards the bus station, which was 400 meters away. All that was in my mind was how Amitabh Bachchan went about punishing the bad people. I was too much intoxicated by the movie, and I slowly started to drift away and away from my parents. The sight of an ice cream parlor woke me up. I turned back to ask my parents to get me an ice cream. I saw a lot of faces, but none of them resembled my parents. I was lost. Suddenly, I got panicky. I thought about those gruesome incidents where children are kidnapped, their eyes plucked out and made to beg. I started to call out for my parents. I asked each and every person, did you see my parents? Did you see my parents? Being late at night, nobody seemed to care and nobody seemed to help. No, not all of them, except for one. This nice person told me, son, I'll take you to your parents. I followed that man just like the rats followed Pied Piper of Hamelin. I followed him till the theater and I could hear the faint sound of my cousin calling out, Manu, Manu. Then I saw a face which no kid can ever mistake, the face of my mom. I ran towards her, hugged her and kissed her. She took me to my father who was waiting in the theater, thoroughly broken, totally dejected and with his head buried in his face. As he saw me, tears trickled down his face. We all sat down for a couple of minutes to ease our emotion and went back home. That night before I slept, I thought about the whole episode. If not for that particular person, I wouldn't have or I might not have seen my parents again. I might not have even got an opportunity to see the wonderful aspects of life. I'd like to end my speech by thanking that special person whose name I don't even know, who helped me out to find my parents. Thank you.
On the college day, the voice of the compare boomed across the auditorium. Now we move on to the most prestigious awards of KC College. The best lady student, that is Miss KC, is Miss Gitanjali Mallya. This was the culmination of all the hard work, the effort, the sweat and blood which I had put in after a bitter defeat. In my 12th standard, I had got 87% in PCB. In Bombay, if you want to get admission in medicine, the minimum you require is 93%. I didn't know what to do. My best friends had got into the best medical colleges and engineering colleges, and I was the only one in my group who didn't get into a professional college. For 2 months, I was like a zombie, not knowing what was going on, walking in a trance. Then my father sat down with me one evening and told me, Gitanjali, this is not what one should do. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And my father inspired me to study hard for my term exams. In my term exams, I got 50 out of 50 in mathematics. This showed me that I had still got some hope left. I could study hard and could achieve things in life. Although I had just taken a BSc compared to my friends, I decided that I'm going to put in my best. And then I began working hard. In this, my faculty and my family supported me all through. My faculty always sent me to intercollegiate seminars, competitions, and I represented the college. I also took part in a program called MPFL, which takes functional literacy for adult education. Thereby, I began collecting a lot of certificates. And then the head of the Department of Economics proposed my name for Miss KC. I was almost certain that I wouldn't get it because all the other competitors were third-year students and I was the only second-year student. And one of the competitors was my good friend Sunita D'Souza. She was the sports champion of our college and I said, well, there's no chance for me. But then the panel consisted of our principal, the head of the departments and 2 students from the student council. And I was thoroughly grilled. By the time I came out, I was worried. But after a few moments, the principal came out and told me, Gitanjali, you've made it. You are Miss KC. So this victory was sweeter than the one I had achieved in 10th standard when I got a CBSE merit list. This was because I had suffered a big defeat. I had lost hope. But then I gathered myself and achieved something good. And my family and my friends were proud of me. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Harpreet Sani. My most memorable event took place 3 years ago not in India, in Kenya. The venue was the Air Adventure School. I had planned, I'm a big enthusiast for adventure sports, and my father was posted in Kenya. So I came across this chance to jump from parachute jumping. They offer you can do parachute jumps for a small fee. It's quite common in the Western countries. So in a moment of bravado, I enrolled myself up. Took a week of training, very intensive training. They toughen you up quite a lot. They don't want you to break bones when you land. And there I was ready for the jump, standing at the airstrip. Pair of baggy trousers, 2 sizes big for me. A parachute, very big for me. And a reserve chute. And a helmet which seems to nearly cover my head. Well, I had no chance of turning back. I had to go. And along with me were 8 other passengers, including my father, who was also jumping with me. The plane was a Cessna 503. It's a very old type of model plane, relatively slow, so it allows newcomers to jump. At that moment, standing there at the airfield, you have so many doubts creeping into you. The moment you enroll, then that time you feel so great, you feel a man. But when you're standing at the airfield, you wonder, why did I do that? Am I crazy? Why am I jumping out of a perfectly good aeroplane? What reason should I have? What reason do I have to jump? I mean, I can walk. Why do I have to fly like a bird? As it is, there are so many birds in the sky. But at that time, nothing helps you. You have to go. And worst of all, there were 3 girls in my group. I couldn't even show them I was scared. They were much more braver than me. So I stood in the line, climbed onto the aeroplane, and sat. 1 girl here, 1 girl there. I couldn't even shake. They would see I was shaking. Well, I don't know how I managed, but 15 minutes later, the plane was up at 3,000 meters. That is the standard altitude for a static line jump. There was a lot of laughing, lot of bickering. Everybody seems to be enjoying themselves, except for me. I laugh. They laugh, I laugh. But down in, oh, I'm scared. If my mother was there, I would have started crying. But thank God, she wasn't. So we reach the height, the plane starts to circle, so that we have a comparatively calmer air when we jump out. The doors are open, and the silence of the plane is replaced by the sound as the air rushes by. A very high roaring sound, something you cannot imagine. It's like driving the car at 200 kilometers with the windows rolled down. If you do that, you nearly get blown away, but in the plane it's like kind of different. We line up, hook our stat lines with the static line. So that is when we jump, our parachute automatically opens. Stand in a line, and the instructor is howling over and over again the instructions which we must follow when we jump out of the plane. The light goes green and out we tumble. You really don't have time to think during those few seconds because it's all in a motion and the instructor is behind you. So if anybody falters, he gets a kick right back. He jumps out anyway. The moment you step out, or rather you get snatched out of the plane, the wind is so strong, the moment you just come near the door, you just get snatched out of the door. And before you know, you're out in the air. And something which you really remember the most is feeling of complete helplessness, weightlessness. You have no control over your fall. You fall straight, you fall head first, you fall sideways. You can't do anything about it. But all you do is you count the seconds. For the 6th second, your parachute must open. And before you know, you feel that all too familiar jerk. The most beautiful feeling in the earth. It breaks your shoulders, but when you look up, you see the most beautiful sight, your parachute. Colorful, and your passport to safety. Because if it doesn't open, you're going to go up the fast way. Once the parachute opens and when you realize you're going to land down safely, the view you see is the most beautiful you can ever imagine. 100 of miles around, nothing to stop your line of sight, and you're floating free, and you see all the other parachutes floating down with you. But within 2 minutes, on the most 3 minutes, this is all over. You're coming down to land, or rather the ground is coming up to meet you. Bring your knees together, bend them, and hit the ground with a thud. Do the required half rolls, then up you stand, feeling like a real man. Thank you.
My name is Hita Uchal, and my most memorable experience relates to the youngest member of my family. She is no more now, but sweet memories still linger on. Sherry came into our lives when my brother and I were already into our teens. She was, you could say, an accident. With glossy hair, a part nose and elfin charm, Sherry was the perfect bitch. Thoroughbred with a lineage that went back 9 generations, she was one of those rare golden miniature Pomeranians. When Sherry came of age, the search for a suitable match began. Most of the males in Bombay of her breed turned out to be of doubtful parenthood. If one had a crooked tail, the other had an ungainly gait, and the third had a squint in his eye. Our search finally took us to Bangalore. It turned out that Mr. Wright was a distant cousin from her paternal grandfather's side. With great expectations, we returned to Bombay. Prenatal training sessions began in earnest, with all of us participating wholeheartedly, except for Sherry, who insisted that she had better things to do. I was very curious to see how the whole thing would take place, but when D-Day, or rather D-Night, arrived, Sherry would have none of our prying eyes. She chose a dark, inaccessible corner right under the cot to go into labor. That night, I went to bed dreaming of furry, cute little creatures with dreamy, sleepy eyes. Imagine my surprise when I awoke to find 3 hairless creatures, no more than the size of my index fingers. With their eyes shut tight and their limbs hanging uselessly by their sides, they resemble something out of a Steven Spielberg movie. There must be definitely wrong that the male must be having some genetic abnormality, I cried. My dad assured me, no. Give them a chance to grow up. You two are not a very pretty sight when you were born. Nevertheless, I couldn't help marveling at how well nature has equipped even the dumb animals to cope with the miracle of motherhood. Who tells them to find a safe place when the time has come? Who teaches them to rupture the placenta with their own teeth? Who tells them to lick off the mucous membrane and get the young animal to take its first breath of life? My disappointment turned to curiosity and gradually to wonder as I watched the little creatures slithering blindly but unerringly to their mother's breast. After 2 or 3 days, they opened their eyes to take a look around their new world, but their main preoccupation continued to be their feet. For us, however, they were a full-time occupation. School, college, office, studies, books, friends were lost somewhere behind feeding bottles, mashed potatoes, gripe waters and farricks. By now there was a never-ending stream of visitors, friends and relatives who came to give their advice and opinions. ये माँ के जैसे लग रहा है, ये तो बाप के ऊपर गया होगा. Every day was a novel experience as little pups began to evolve a distinct personality of their own. But the most hilarious time was when they suddenly decided that if God has given us legs, we might as well learn to use them. Shaking dangerously from side to side and their knees buckling, they looked like they were just returning from Bacchus Inn. However, when they found their feet, we too began to find ours sticking out from the holes in our shoes, as nothing from combs to hairbrushes, clothes to carpets could escape their devious destruction. The time finally came when we had to find good and caring homes for them. Giving them up was heartbreaking, and there was gnawing, painful emptiness in the house for a long time. But looking back, I now realize how close they had brought all of us together. And even though we've all gone our separate ways now, the family bond was immeasurably strengthened by the experience of vicarious motherhood that we all went through together. And from the depths of my heart, I thank God for that sweet blessing. Thank you.
The funny thing about my most memorable event is that I didn't realize it was the most memorable event until it was over and gone. I was returning to college in Mysore, where I was doing my engineering, after my summer vacations in Malaysia. I'd spent a month there. I was dreading the thought of going back to college, attending class and the lousy mess food and all that. I finished the formalities at the airport, and I was sitting in the boarding lounge. Then suddenly, along with the Indian embassy official, comes this guy. He's around medium height, probably around my age. His hair is absolutely unkempt. Looks like he hasn't shaved in days. It looks like he's just woken up after 1 year's sleep or something like that. Anyway, he had these dark rings under his eyes, so not a very pleasant picture all in all. The official with this guy was helping him through every formality in the airport. So I thought this guy might be important. So I generally kept him in my mind. Once we finished boarding, I got into the plane and I was checking out which seat I was. I was walking along the aisle, and surprise of surprises, I was sitting exactly next to the same guy who I had seen in the boarding lounge. Now this guy, he was a very quiet guy. He sat down, he pressed the attendance bell, and the air hostess came and he said, I don't want to be disturbed during the entire course of this flight. He said, I don't want any dinner, I don't want any refreshments, nothing. And I was shocked. I said, no dinner, no, nothing to eat. And this must be a real vague guy. I don't think I want to know him. Because the moment I get into a plane, I just start eating until the moment we land. Then after that, anyway, I enjoyed my dinner. I was relaxing, I was reading the newspaper. And I went through the sports page. And there was this article about how Vishwanathan Anand had just won a competition, a chess competition in Kuala Lumpur, where I was flying from. 2 hours later, Vishwanathan Anand, I didn't know he was Vishwanathan Anand, he woke up and he started speaking to me, and we generally spoke about everything. He told me how he had lived in the Philippines as a young boy, how he was very close to his parents. He told me about his trips to Europe. But during the entire course of this whole conversation, he never once mentioned that he was a chess player, never once mentioned anything about chess. And I didn't have any idea that this was the great Vishwanathan Anand. I even discussed Malaysian politics with him, and I acted as though I was some sort of major cat, so to say, because I thought he was, just another sort of guy I was meeting. Then we landed at Madras airport, and in the baggage collection area, there were two people, and these two people were his parents. So he went, touched their feet, and this struck me as unusual because in an airport like Madras, the security is very important. So it's not common that you'd find outsiders coming in there. So then I started thinking, I thought, oh, this guy might be an important guy. But even then, no clue as to who he is. Then after that, I finished all my formalities. This guy wishes me good luck, goodbye, the usual stuff you say when you know you'll never meet anybody anyway again. So then I go out, and then my sister and my brother-in-law are waiting outside to meet me. So they come out and say, "Do you see Vishwanathan Anand? He was in your plane." And I go, "Vishwanathan Anand? No, he's not. He couldn't be on this flight. No way." He says, "No, there he is. There. He's coming out." And I just look at that guy and I say, "Oh my God, that's Vishwanathan Anand." And I think, besides that fact that I was so stupid, I didn't know what Vishwanathan Anand looked like. I just like to think what Vishwanathan Anand would have thought of me. Probably the greatest sportsman India has ever produced, and he didn't know what Joseph Kuriakose didn't know what Vishwanathan Anand looked like. I thought he was an illegal alien. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kavita. I still remember how excited I was that day because for the first time I was taking the car all out by myself. My sister and myself had planned a small trip to the local market just to try out my driving skills. I was very confident since I had just finished my driving classes, and I was very confident that there will be a smooth drive ahead. How wrong I was. For as we started, the first indication of the wrong that we were going to do was as we turned around a bend. But instead of slowing down and jabbing the brake, I pressed on the accelerator. Zoom we went, almost knocking into a lorry coming around the bend. My sister by then had started saying her prayers and was cursing her luck for coming out with me. Slowly I gathered myself again and we began all again. Stopping at all the wrong places and at all the wrong times just because I was not adjusting the gear at the right times. I sure got a lot of stares and a lot of curses that day. On our way back, suddenly, out of the blue, popped a bus right in front of me. I lost my nerve again. And to prevent a head-on collision, I turned and pushed a two-wheeler off the road. Thank God he was not hurt. It looked as if all the animals, all the people, all the vehicles on the road that day were out to get in front of my vehicle. My sister by then had gone into a state of shock, and I was a bundle of nerves. It would have taken me at the maximum about 15 to 20 minutes, had taken me more than an hour to complete. At last we were home. We were on safer ground again. It was all over, or was it? Bang! I went right into the garage wall. I got out of the car and went right head on into my mother. It took me more than 1 week to get on talking terms with her again, and it took me more than 2 months to be friends with the car again. Thus ended my memorable, disastrous experiment with the car. But I thank my stars, I'm still alive.
Good afternoon, friends. My name is Krishna Kumar. When we were asked to speak about a memorable event in our life, I was at a loss as to what to say. I racked and racked my brains, and I was still at a loss as to what to say. Like most people, I too had my share of ups and downs, and my recent memory being quite sharp, no particular event stood out more than any other. And as to my early life, I can only remember a mosaic of pictures with which no particular event could be identified. It was only sometime late last evening that I realized that what is memorable is not necessarily what you remember clearly, but rather those memories that bring back something which is good, something which is bad, something emotional. With this in mind, I would like to share with you a small period of my life which gives me a sense of satisfaction. This period was during my second year of graduation at St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science. It was the time when I was elected the class representative of my class. Like most colleges during that in Bangalore, our college too had a variety of inter-class cultural events and activities. Our class was not one of great talent, and we were never strong favorites to win the overall trophy. We did have some very talented personalities, but they were limited to their areas of excellence. While the final year sections of the PEM and the CPZ were very strong contenders for the top 2 positions. Our competitions are normally held for a period of 2.5 to 3 weeks, and our class decided to take part in all the events. As the competitions progressed, we took part in most of the competitions. We won a few, we lost a few, but we made sure that we took part in every competition that was held. And by the end of the second week, we suddenly found that we were in the reckoning for the overall prize. What had happened was that while we had taken part in all the events and gathered all the points for participation, the favorites had restricted their participation to those events which they felt sure that they would win. And in those events, there were a few upsets, and the two classes fought against each other, and the prizes were shared. At the end, we did win. We had a lot of fun taking part in all those events, and it was good to win against all odds. We had pipped the favorites to the victory stand by a single point, only because we had got the maximum points for participation. When I think about those days, I realize that more than anything else, what those events brought home were 2 important points. Yes, it is participation that counts, and not winning. And you may have all the talent in the world and yet not succeed. What is important is that you have to channelize your talent in the right direction. Yes, I will continue to cherish those pleasant memories. Thank you.
Hello friends, I'm Madhumita Rudra. Today I'm here to relate to you about the most memorable incident which has taken place in my life. But firstly, what is a memorable incident? A memorable incident is an incident which takes place which doesn't necessarily have to be sad or have to be happy, but something which stays on with you forever again. Now my story, my memorable incident which has stayed on with me goes on like this. It might not be very funny for me, but it is like this. It was a hot summer afternoon in Delhi, and I had to run to the market to run an errand for my mother. It was very hot that day, and the mercury touched sky high. I carried with me a red umbrella to protect myself from the scorching heat. I quickly finished my marketing, for I wanted to rush back home. since I wanted to come back to the cool four walls of the house and have a cold drink. As I was walking back home, I suddenly heard some loud footsteps behind me. Thinking that there were many other people like me who wanted to rush back home, I casually looked behind. And to my utter dismay, can you believe what I saw? I saw a black raging bull charging down the road. Initially, I thought that the bull was just charging down the road and it didn't bother much. And then like a bolt of thunder, it struck me. Hey, the bull was charging towards me. And the reason? My big red umbrella. I quickly threw my umbrella, threw my things and ran as fast as I could. I saw the gates of a bungalow nearby. I quickly ran inside that and quickly shut the door. Thought I was in a safe place and I looked around. I had just gathered my nerves when I looked closely at the gate of the bungalow. And you know what the sign was said? Beware of dogs. I almost fainted when I saw that. I would have really gone berserk, but I tried to keep myself calm and quickly looked around. There, I saw behind the house there was a fencing system. It was full of barbed wires, but I did not care. My main intention was to get out of that place. I ran out and in that process and panic and hurry, I got a deep wound on my leg. Now friends, you might find this incident hilarious and funny, but this is not for me. For this has not only left a psychological scar, but also has left a physical scar on me. Since the mark of the wound is still there on my legs, and believe me, it has found a permanent place in the identification pages of my passport. And to talk about the psychological aspect, let's talk about the better. Since even today, if I see a cow or a buffalo, I really faint. Forget the bulls. And in Manipal, there are all of them. Whenever I see one in the road, I really want to faint. I really skip a beat. But somehow, I don't know how I manage. I think I'm getting used thanks to this place. So friends, when you are on the road next time, and if you happen to have a red umbrella or have a red shirt on, just be careful, or that incident might just turn out to be the most memorable day of your life.
I'm Arshad Mirte. As all of us will be having many important and memorable incidents in life, I want to narrate to you the most important and the most memorable. This incident has one more incident linked up to it. This incident occurred in the year 1990 in the month of March and on the date the 29th. That day we had our housewarming ceremony of the new house which we had built up at Bangalore. It was an united effort on the part of the entire family to build up that house. As all of you might be knowing, the problems of building up the house in a big metropolis city like Bangalore. We too had our share of problems and other related activities. Many of our relatives had come up from far off places to attend for that function. During the same time, or more or less a week before that, my father was appointed as the judge of the Karnataka High Court. So our joy knew no bounds that we had two incidents to celebrate at the same time, in the same period of time. That day we had a streamline of visitors ranging from many dignitaries such as Shri S. Mohan, who was then the acting governor of Karnataka and who is now the Supreme Court Judge of India. And we had our midst Mr. M.N. Venkatachalaya, who is the present Chief Justice of India, and Shri N. Venkatachala, who is also the sitting judge of the Supreme Court of India. So they could find out some of the time and come and attend the function which we had just done it for the sake of our family members. These two incidents appear very important to me. I happened to see closely great people who had come down to visit our house and who had reached to such great heights by their heights in life by their sheer hard work and determination. And I, or for that matter, my whole of my family, were very happy to see that my father was now one amongst them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm Mohit, and speaking of memorable incidents, I've had quite a few memorable incidents, some good, some bad. I will be relating one such incident which I treasure and hold very close to my heart. One bright morning in the month of June
in the year 1952, a scrawny-looking young lad looked furtively around the railway platform, boarded the first train out of the Ernakulam junction. Tears flowed down his grime-laden face in apprehension of the uncertain future that awaited him at the land of his destiny, which incidentally happened to be the land of Hyderabad. There was no turning back for this particular boy who responded to the name of Ravi. A runaway from home, Ravi underwent a lot of self-introspection as to whether he had taken the right decision to leave the comfort of his home in spite of the imploring of his mother not to do so. All her pleading and advice went unheeded. The last but one of the 4 sons and 2 daughters of a middle-class landlord, Ravi, who had completed his class 10, one fine day confronted his father, who, in turn, informed him of his inability to educate him any further, as he had exhausted all his financial resources in educating Ravi's older brothers. He, however, offered to get Ravi a small job in one of the cloth mills close to home. A heated argument ensued between father and son that day. The next day, it was a highly infuriated, confused and irritated Ravi who decided to leave home with rupees 300, which his mother hurriedly thrust into his hand as she wiped away the tears with the other. Ravi never went back home for the next 8 years. It was a very nervous Ravi who alighted at the Hyderabad station the next day. It was with a great deal of difficulty that he was able to find a lodging, if you might call it so. He occupied a small cubicle in a single room which he shared with 6 other students. The rent which he paid was rupees 8 with an advance of 50 rupees, which at that point of time was considered a very princely sum, especially when a student was paying for it. It was in this atmosphere that Ravi completed his plus 2, as he worked during the latter part of the day to make both ends meet. His first job was in a typewriting institute as a part-time instructor and learned stenography at the same time. In due course, he graduated in commerce, which was no mean achievement, considering the fact that his companions were mostly in an inebriated condition and that their drunken revelry was not conducive for him to study. So whenever Ravi had to study, he ended up under a street lamp most of the time. Ravi later on worked as a lower division clerk in the income tax department. He left to join a public sector company, only to retire last year as its materials manager. Today, he is on the board of directors of a pharmaceutical agency which is doing very well. His academic qualifications would read something like this: a graduate in commerce with distinction, a bachelor's in law, a diploma in materials management, a diploma in marketing management with an MBA in marketing to boot. His knowledge in computers would put an average student among us to shame. This is why I tell you to put in all the effort you have. When you are provided with all the comforts, I don't see how your attitude to life can be so indifferent, was what Ravi told one of his 2 sons, who as usual had thrown some tantrum or the other. Ravi, as most of you would have guessed, my friends, is my father, and I am that errant son. After listening to him relate this story, there has been quite a change in me as a person and my attitude in general. When I think of the untold hardships he went through, the suffering he had to undergo to come up in life, even today, tears well up in my eyes. He is today what most of us would give our right hand to be, a self-made man. I never got a chance to tell my father this, maybe because I'm in awe of him. But the fact remains that I love him and respect him, but above all, I admire him and very proud of him. I hope to find my place in the sun someday, from far away from that protecting shadow of his, but it's going to be a very tough job, but I am going to try. Thanks a lot.
I'm Prashant Naik. The most memorable incident in my life occurred just about 8 months ago, quite recently, and it's quite fresh in my memory. When I think about it, it still passes a shiver up my spine. You may recall that the Babri Masjid was demolished on December 6th of last year. For up to about 1 month after that, there was a lot of communal disturbance inside the country, and there was a lot of arson and rioting going on. Well, anyway, fortunately or unfortunately, it so happened that on 20th of January 1993, I, along with my uncle, his wife, and 2 small kids, were supposed to make a trip from Mangalore to Belgaum, that was by car. When we had left Mangalore, actually there was no sign at all of any communal problem, and hence we were quite free to make the trip. In any case, we set off early in the morning at about 7. It's a 10-hour journey, and we did not come across any untoward incident along the highway until we entered. There is a small town called Bhatkal on the way. Until we entered the outskirts of this town, and over there actually the only thing which indicated to us that there might be some problem was that there was a sort of uneasiness in the air, in the sense that there were not many people over there and all the shops were closed. Anyway, still we thought that nothing serious might come of it, and we continued. At one place along the way, there is a 90-degree turn along the highway which you have to take if you want to continue on the highway. It was then that we saw them, a crowd of about 20 to 25 people, and I think it was the most horrible sight in my life. They were armed with sticks, weapons and stones and whatnot. I mean, just looking at them, my heart missed a beat, and I said, say your prayers, here it comes, there's something going to happen. And the crowd, actually we could make out, it was, you can say it was a sort of Hindu crowd, because many of them, they wore these saffron clothes, and we thought that now we are in deep trouble. Actually, immediately they were upon us. My uncle, he was driving the car, and they sort of came close to the car and stopped the way. So he was forced to open the door. Actually, as he was rolling down the window, they had a look at his face, and now, unfortunately, what happened was he had a mustache and he had a French beard, so he had that Pakka Muslim look. And I mean, at first sight, I'm sure that's the first thing that would have come into their mind. So they just pulled him out, and they started manhandling him straight away. And I was just shocked, because I had never seen anybody getting hit so badly. And actually, then some of the elements in the crowd, they came and stopped the other person, and they inquired about what's your religion, what's your name, etc. My uncle furnished the details, but still they were not convinced. He said he'll show them the license card also, but the crowd was in no mood to listen. Then I sat in the car, dumbstruck, watching. I couldn't make out clearly because there were too many people and there was a melee in the crowd. But I could roughly make out that my uncle was pointing towards the car and saying that, look, this is my family and we are on a peaceful journey. Why are you harassing us? Anyway, my aunt, she did an unexpected thing. She just jumped out of the car, and believe it or not, she showed the crowd her sindoor and all that stuff, including her Mangal Sutra. I mean, this may sound really melodramatic, like from a Hindi movie, but I can tell you it was really true. In my mind, there were 1,000 things going on at that moment. Even then the crowd was not fully convinced. My uncle, he called me out and he said, he asked me to do something very strange. He said, show them your sacred thread. Show them anything which is going to save our life, because we have to do something of this kind. I mean, sacred thread was something which I had always worn grudgingly all my life. But okay, I realized that, okay, I had to do this because this was the only way out. My uncle's kids were about aged 4 and 1, and they knew that something was very wrong, and they were just bawling. Of course, they couldn't make out what exactly was the problem. Then my uncle was virtually on his knees imploring the crowd to let us pass through. Even then they were deliberating some things among themselves, and I can tell you that those moments were horrible. Anyway, after what seemed like an eternity, the crowd decided to let us on, and in spite of a divided opinion, the experience was so overwhelming that my aunt, she just broke down completely as soon as we got into the car. I don't know if it was out of fear or out of relief, but I suspect it was a mixture of both. But when we had been surrounded by the crowd, a whole range of emotions had flooded into my mind. Primarily a sense of fear, hopelessness, and desperation. I mean, you can imagine being in such a situation where there's nothing you can do. It was as if I was about to witness my own death frame by frame. This is no exaggeration. I mean, I had read in papers that, arson happens, rioting happens, so many people get killed, but I had always had that thinking in my mind, so what, it could also always happen to the other guy, it can never happen to me. However, this incident brought me down to the earth. I thank God a million times. However, our ordeal was not yet over. 5 or 6 kilometers from where this episode took place, we were stopped by another crowd. Believe it or not, this time it was a Muslim crowd. However, this time my uncle did a very good piece of quick thinking. He did not stop the car fully. While rolling down the windshield, all he did was show his face and he said Salam Alaikum, and he just accelerated. There was no way the car could have the people could have got in front of the car, else they would have got crushed. However, we were so drained that we were so relieved that we could not react to this happening. Having almost come face to face with death, I could not help but thinking about the irrationality of our reasoning. Can a human being's life be so cheap that it can be taken just on the basis of belonging to a particular religion when it is usually not a question of his choice? Can you tell if a person is a Hindu or Muslim by the color of his blood? I came to the conclusion that there was something basically flawed in our thinking. I leave it up to you to decide. Thank you.
My name is Ramesh Kungar, and my most memorable incident goes like this. It was a period of mint money. Yes, a period of mint money. It was a period of fortunes and missed opportunities. It was a period during which emotions and enthusiasms ruled high. Yes, it was a period of the share market boom. I distinctly remember at that time the Bombay Stock Exchange share index was at about 4,500, almost at its peak. It was during this period again, which was a period, I would say, of deciding strategies for investment and disinvestment, that I received a phone call from a relative of mine who knew that I had an inherent interest in shares. He called up and asked me, "Boss, what are your plans for the future?" Somehow, this question itself reminded me of a typical Hindi movie scene in which Robert comes and asks Ajit that, "Boss, aage ka kya plan hai?" Anyway, I told him my strategy, in which I categorically mentioned that I am going to disinvest large amounts of my shareholdings. On the other hand, his view was that he said that the share market is going to rise further, to which I agreed. But at the same time, I told him not to trust his stars too much. It's better to be safe than to be sorry. Anyway, he got convinced by my opinion, and the next day, we took his car and we went to the broker. Once we reached the broker's place, the broker was surprised by our decision. Anyway, we again managed to convince the broker from our point of view and told him that we are going to disinvest our shares. After 1 month, the Bombay Stock Exchange share index crashed to 1800 level. Imagine being thrown from the 4th floor of a new TAPMI building straight to the ground floor with heads down, and that also with a loud thud. But during all this cry, one of those who had the last laugh, as by then we had managed to capitalize on the share boom. This incident has and will always remain my most memorable incident of my life, at least till the next share boom. Thank you.
I'm Priya Parthasarathi. Every one of us have got memories of the past. They might be good, they might be bad, they might be sweet, they might be bitter. Every day in our lives, so many things happen, but our mind has got the prudence to remember only the most important things. For all such memories, certain incidents are very precious. You nurture them and you relive them. But the most memorable incidents are the ones that teach you, guide you, and change you for a lifetime. They move you and arouse something from within you. Mine is one such incident that made me realize the values of life, the brotherhood and love for the humankind. The season was summer, and what does that mean? Holidays. It was the 21st of May 1991. We had just returned from a trip to the Ooty Hills. I was very tired and I went to sleep early. I had pleasant dreams about the hill when I realized somebody trying to wake me up. I woke up and found my father beside me. He told me Rajiv Gandhi has been assassinated. For a few seconds, I could not understand anything. I just blinked and looked at the clock. It said 4 o'clock. He certainly wouldn't have been joking at that time. And slowly the truth sunk in with great intensity. He was such a charismatic leader and I adored him a lot. What a great national loss. And then my father told me what had happened. And I felt so bad. And it is such a pity that such gruesome, cold-blooded killing must have happened in Tamil Nadu. Newspapers carried sensational headlines and the television was doing its part. The whole country was mourning. It must have been 7 o'clock then. We heard some agonized cries for help from outside. We all rushed to the balcony to look what was happening. And what I saw sends chills through my spine even today. There was a van which was surrounded by a lynch mob pelting stones at it. I could see women and children inside the van. Some ruffians were splashing petrol all over the van. They were actually trying to burn them all alive. Seeing this, my father got into action. He immediately contacted the local police and asked for help. My mother pulled us all in and shut all our doors. I wanted to help, but I could do nothing. I felt so miserable. Luckily for us, the police got into action very quickly. We heard some gunshots and then angry shouts. Slowly I mustered enough courage to look out through the window, and the mob was gone. The police were chasing them. But the people inside the van were left helpless. Already a part of their vehicle was damaged. The whole state was in turmoil. Now where would they go? What would they do? There were 16 in all, 5 women, 3 children and 8 men. My brother was the first one to invite them all in. But they were all very confused and afraid. So we all went out and assured them that we were just trying to help. They were a group of North Indians touring the South India. They could not speak Tamil, we could not speak Hindi, and only one of them spoke very little English. But we all understood the language of humanity. At that hour of crisis, India stood strong, brave and united. We consoled them and asked them to stay with us till arrangements could be made for their travel. The 3 kids were mortified and my heart ached when I saw one of them bleeding. Now why is this happening? Why is that every time a national leader dies, innocent people are threatened? The troublemakers are not necessarily sympathizers of the slain leader. Even if they are, is this the way to do it? This land, the land where Mahatma Gandhi was born, seems to have forgotten everything about non-violence. That day kept me thinking. I've still not got an answer. Why are people behaving this way? Is it the poverty? Is it the frustration? Or is it the basic instinct that is, basic animal instinct that is coming to the surface? But on that day, I also learned one more important thing. India has not lost its hope. We still can stand united. People do not have any contempt for each other. That day was an enlightening mixture of emotions for me. I was sad, angry, sympathetic, kind, humane, happy and pensive all at the same time. They stayed with us till the evening and then they were escorted to a safe place. We still have contact with some of them. That day a bond was tied, a track of friendship was laid. That was the first day when I told myself proudly, I am an Indian and I still do. We stand united. We could make this land a better place to live for you, for me and for the entire human race if we only cared enough for the living. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Hello friends, I'm Varaj Pujara. All of us have some good memories as well as bad memories, but there are some incidents which hit us like a bolt of thunder and are unforgettable. They have a great impact on our lives. Compared to our daily routine, these incidents stand out like lofty mountain peaks. I present before you an incident which I cannot forget and which made me sit up and think of what life is all about. 3 years ago, I'd gone on a trip to Bombay to visit my grandparents with a few of my very close friends. During the return journey, we had a very young person, a young man of around 21 years of age, sitting with us. All of us started talking and we got real close. He told us that he was an only child and that his parents were both sick, his mom a paralytic and his dad a heart patient. He was doing his engineering. He was a very ambitious person and he wanted to do a lot in life. He wanted to study further, he wanted to go abroad. But because of his parents' illness, he had decided to devote the best of his life looking after his parents. He regaled us with jokes and kept us laughing throughout the journey. But beneath the composed exterior was a highly tormented state of mind. After a while, he left the compartment saying that he would just go and meet a few of his friends who were also traveling by the same train in the other compartment. Suddenly, there was an ominous jolting of carriages, jerking the passengers from their seats. It left us wondering why the train had stopped. Out of curiosity, I peeped out into a large crowd standing outside. We wanted to see what had happened and we went out. And the sight which I saw is a sight which I'll remember throughout my life. A corpse lying with its head cut off. A wave of horror and pity ran down my spine. A deep breath went right into my lungs through my clenched teeth. It was a ghastly sight to see the corpse on the ground. It was so gruesome that my heart just leapt into my mouth. I did not have the courage to look at the severed head and see the person's face. On inquiring, we found out that the person had been leaning out of the train, and that was when the mishap took place. He had just put his head out when it hit an electric pole, and his head was just severed away from his body. He died an instant death. Somebody had seen the incident happening and had pulled the chain. We got into the compartment feeling rather sad about this incident. Just then, a young person came to collect the luggage of the person who had been sitting with us. We were very surprised and confused as to why somebody was asking for his luggage. I was flabbergasted when I discovered that the victim of the accident was the same person who had been traveling with us. It was very difficult for me to reconcile with the fact that the person with whom I had been just speaking a few minutes ago was no longer in this world. He had so many hopes, so many aspirations. He wanted to do so many things in life. He wanted to look after his parents, but he did not know that his dreams were going to be just that, dreams, and never turn into reality. I can relate this horrendous incident to the story of Shravan Kumar, who was equally devoted to his parents, but the hold of destiny leaves a man helpless in the claws of fate. I was left with a sad heart and empty feeling, contemplating the misery of his poor parents. It made me realize that life is too short and death is but a reality. To conclude, I just remember a few lines from Shakespeare's As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, the acts being 7 ages. Thank you.
I'm Rajesh Mani. First of all, I would like to say that this was not the most memorable incident in my life. It was one of the most memorable incidents in my life. This happened in November 1990. I was the president of the Interact Club of Bangalore in Ranagar, and we were organizing a cultural festival called Intrafest. We had to work a lot. There was lots of work, but how much of a work we had, I had to get back home by 8. My dad, being from the army, was a very strict man, so I had to be back home by 8. So that night we had a lot of work. Whenever I had so much work, I would get 2 of my friends, go home and start working at home. So that night the same thing happened. We went back home, started working at around 9. Our work went on. We didn't know what the time was. It was around 1:30 when we suddenly said we've almost finished our work and we're feeling very hungry. So we said, what do we do? So the best thing we could do was go to a coffee shop. The only thing would have been open is some coffee shop in 5-star. So we said that's the only thing we could do. So we had very limited money, and the other problem was we didn't have conveyance. We had only one bike, and there were 3 of us. So we said we'll take the risk. We got onto the bike. We rolled out the bike from the house, went to the end of the road, started the bike, and went to the hotel. We went to a hotel called Hotel Ashoka, and we had soup. We didn't have enough money, so we had 2 soups. And by the time it was 2:30, and we had sneaked out of the house, so I was very scared. My dad would get up and he'd watch, find out that I was not at home. If he found out that I was not at home, I would be grounded for life. So I was scared, so I told my friends, let's finish fast and move. So on the way back, I said, let's take a shortcut. So we took a shortcut. Everything was going on fine till we came to this dark and desolate road. So as we came to the dark and desolate road, we saw 2 men at the end of the road. So we ignored their presence and kept going. As we went to the end of the road, these guys came to the middle of the road and stopped us. So when they stopped us, we didn't realize who they were. They were policemen. So I got out of the bike. I started begging, pleading, the usual stuff, saying, sorry boss, we won't do it again. He said, why are you going triples? So we said, no, we're feeling very hungry. So he said, no, come to the station. So he says, we said, no, please boss, we're just feeling very hungry and things like that. Everything was going on okay. We were pleading, and he would have left us off in another 5 minutes. But one of my friends, he was an income tax officer's son. He couldn't take it anymore. So he got up and he said, what do you think of yourself? I can get you transferred in 2 days from here. So this the constable couldn't take. He said, okay, now I'm taking you to the police station. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning. I sneaked out of the house. I don't know what I'm going to do next. If dad finds out I'm not in the house and I'm the police, next thing I know, I'm in the police station. So we're sitting there, this guy says, and when we were talking to the constable, this income tax officer's son also said that I can call the DIG and I can get you transferred in 2 days. So when we went to the police station, this guy took out the phone, kept it on the table and said, call the DIG. At 3:30 in the morning to call the DIG is not funny. So we said, no sir, we were just playing the fool. He said, no, I want you to call the DIG now.
So we said, no, please, sorry, and the usual pleading bit. Then he said, okay, I can let you go, but you'll have to speak to the inspector. So we said, where's the inspector? So the inspector is sleeping. So he said, when will he get up? I don't know when he'll get up. So we said, I'm out of the house, we had to go back home and things like that. He says, no, when he gets up, you can speak to him and then go. Luckily, at around 4 o'clock in the morning, the inspector got up. So we went to his room, the constable narrated the whole incident. So the inspector asked us who we were. Luckily, the inspector found out that this guy was income tax officer's son. So he said, okay, you can go, but I cannot give you the bike. So this police station is around 3 kilometers from my house. So we didn't know what to do. We again asked him for the bike. He said, no, you show me the papers in the morning and I give you the bike. So the only thing we could do is like run. My dad gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So then the only thing we could do is 3 kilometers run. I've never run that in my life. We ran 3 kilometers non-stop. We reached the house and my room is outside the house. I have a separate room. And there's a passage in which my dad's window opens out. So then we had to duck under the window and then go into my room. So we got in. I went first. I ducked under the window, went in. The second guy came. He ducked under the window, went in. The third guy, he was in such a hurry to go into the window, banged the window. And the worst part was there was a lot of thefts around the place at that time. So my dad thought it was a thief. So we started shouting, thief, thief, when the lights came on. And we didn't know what to do. We bolted to the door. By the time we bolted to my door, opened the door and went into my room. So the lights came on, all the neighbors came out, they're looking for a thief. So we didn't know what to do. We piled onto one bed and we could hear ourselves breathing. And we didn't know, we just kept quiet. So my dad came to my room, he knocked the door. So I had to sound sleepy, so I said, yeah. He said, do you see a thief around here? I said, no. So he says, no, there's a thief around here. Why don't you come and sleep inside the house? So I said, no, I don't want to come inside the house. I'm in my shoes, my jeans, my shirt. So then he said, okay. Bolt the door, be careful. Bolted the door. In half an hour, we didn't speak a word. We were so terrified. After that, we crashed out. The next morning at the breakfast table, my dad was telling us as to how he almost caught the thief's hand and how he saw his face and he could recognize the face next time he sees it and things like that. This was the most exciting and thrilling experience in my life. Thank you.
My name is Rajiv Kuman. As I had mentioned before, my father is a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force. That's where I've taken my most memorable incident of my life. I had returned from Ooty, where I used to study. It was my winter holidays. The driver came and picked me up from the railway station, took me back home. On reaching the house, I found the house empty. And I guessed right, my father was flying. So I went over to the squadron to visit him. On reaching the squadron, they told me he was flying and he was due to land any moment. I'm a very enthusiast of watching aircrafts fly, so I went over to the air traffic control room, or ATC. On reaching the ATC, I saw a lot of people with a lot of grim looks on their eyes, anxiety, and they looked a little shocked. I inquired from one of the persons what was wrong. One of the officers told me that my father was due to land, but his undercarriage won't open fully. That half of the undercarriage was opening, the other wasn't. For a moment, my first reaction was, this couldn't be happening, I'm dreaming. So I looked to the end of the runway from where generally the aircrafts come into land. I saw an aircraft coming in low. It nearly touched down and then took off. I could see that one part of the undercarriage hadn't come out. For a moment, that gave me the impression of the gravity of the situation. It was either a second chance or it was a total error. It was either one or no. They informed me that he has to burn up all his fuel to make it the minimum required to land the aircraft. In the due course, he did many dummy runs when he came in very low, took off, and during the meantime, the fire brigade personnel, the ambulance and the crash barriers, everything were put into position. On coming in for his final approach, it was like a moment that would never go out of my life. Slowly and steadily the aircraft came down, touched, and there were all sparks all over the place. The aircraft for a long moment kept skidding right through the runway and went off the runway into the grass. came to a halt after a long time. At least it seemed like a long time. We could notice my father in a hurry come out, open the canopy of the aircraft, come out of the aircraft and move to a very safe distance. In the meantime, the fire brigade personnel and the ambulance reached the spot to see if everything was under control. I would be thankful to God that that incident didn't have much of a damage on the aircraft, neither to my father. The aircraft within a year's time was repaired and it went back into the air. This is one of the most daring incidents I've ever witnessed in my whole life. I'm proud to be the son of my father and hope I make him proud of me also. Thank you.
I'm Rakesh Mandyan. Everyone has memorable experiences. Pleasant one loves to remember. Unpleasant ones you can never forget. All the non-mathematical wizards had gathered here for their remedial classes a month ago. Professor Kamath was doing his job and I was doing mine. He was teaching, I was sleeping. Well, that explains a lot of things, doesn't it? I was woken from my slumber by the summons from KMC for the medical checkup. Everybody has medical checkups, but I had a truly memorable medical checkup. It was 2:30 in the afternoon when we reached one of the best hospitals in the world. As time passed by, my friends who had come with me left one by one, except Swaminathan. The hospital insisted that both of us were sick, very sick. Finally, a doctor came up to me and told me, well, there's actually no problem, but still, I feel there's a slight murmur in your heart. He advised me to go for checks, a lot of tests, like X-rays, blood test, urine test, stool test, ECG test, Doppler test, and tests which I still can't remember. I reached the final stage of my expedition, the ECG. As I finished my ECG test, a nurse asked me to wait and she asked me to take all the reports to the registrar, who would inform me of any problems I had, that is if I had any. Then I entered the registrar's cabin. I spoke. He refused to. I grinned. He didn't. Then, with a grim look on his face, he spoke very seriously those three unforgettable words: "You have cancer." I was shocked, terrified, and petrified, and quite naturally broke down. Oh my dears, to top it all, he said, "You have only 6 months to live." And even with chemotherapy, I had absolutely no chance of survival. There were tears pouring down my cheeks. I needed someone by my side. I suddenly felt that the future I had planned had gone to pieces. The career I intended to follow lay in ruins. A lot of questions ran through my mind. What about my parents? How would they react? How would they take this shocking news from me? As soon as I left the cabin, I was called back immediately. I actually asked the registrar, "Now what is your problem?" He replied with a sly smile on his face. He had mistaken me for someone else, and I had no cancer. In fact, I was perfectly alright. All his apologies could still not stop me from wanting to pulverize him. Friends, medical checkups are medical checkups, provided they are medical checkups, not mental checkups. I can tell you one thing, it's great absolutely great to be alive again. Thank you.
Hello friends, I'm H.N. Ramchandran. Today I'm going to narrate you an incident which took place about 5 years ago. It was the 23rd of June 1988. I had just finished my SSLC examinations and had been on a holiday to Kashmir with my parents and my sister. We have been having a gala time for about 4 days of our stay in Kashmir. On the 5th day, we had planned to visit a place called Sonmarg, which is about 75 kilometers from Srinagar by bus. The distance of 75 kilometers normally takes about 4.5 hours because we have to go through a hilly terrain. On our way, we stopped by at a tea stall and were sipping a cup of coffee when we heard commotion around us. On inquiring, we found that a bridge had been blown up by the JKLF militants just about a few minutes ago. And it was a very bridge we had passed by about more or less at the same time when the blast took place. And what a miracle, what a narrow escape we all had. And there was utter confusion in the camp. And then, to add to the confusion, my mother, who's very superstitious, said we should turn back and it was a bad omen. We somehow convinced her and said we should resume our journey and go ahead. And finally we resumed our journey, and it was of course delayed by about 4 hours because of this confusion and all that. And when we reached the Sonmarg, we were all rejuvenated by the scenery around us and we thought everything is going to be okay. It was here that the local inhabitants, the people who stay in Sonmarg, make their living by taking the tourists who visit them for a ride in their wooden sledges which come down the hill. These sledges come at a tremendous speed and say nearly at a speed of 100 kilometers an hour. So what had happened, each of us decided to hire a sledge, and then we sat behind the rider. There's normally a rider who behind whom you were supposed to sit. We all sat behind him, each of us took a sledge, and then we started, and in a moment we realized that we were just almost flying in air. It was then when the sledge in which I was traveling with the rider there, we came across a person. As we were coming down the hill, we saw a lady who was taking the video clipping of the scenery around with her back facing us. This man, the rider, shouted out to her to move away from the view, from the track. Normally the sledge follows a fixed track and lands in a specified area. So in spite of us shouting, she couldn't listen to us. And then this man thrust his left foot outside on the sledge, and then the sledge took a right turn. And we lost our balance. And believe it, friends, that was a big mistake. We instead of landing at the specified plane, we just completely missed out the plane, and we went skidding down for about 2.5 kilometers below the hill. And then we didn't know what was happening. Since we had gone off track, we had even lost track of this. We couldn't even locate where we were supposed to have landed. Then the driver's futile attempts to stop the sledge resulted in nothing more. But he ended up breaking his knee and his left foot. And I didn't know what to do, and I just started crying aloud and started shouting. I started praying to the Almighty for help. And then it was then that we noticed a smooth bed of snow ahead of us, and the driver signaled to me that this was our last chance and that we had to jump out. So he caught hold of my hand, and then we abandoned the sledge and jumped out on our left, and we went skidding for about 250 meters before we finally stopped. It was a miracle that I was not at all injured, but the poor man who tried to save me, the rider of the sledge, he suffered multiple fractures and had minor bruises on his knees and hands. My parents, in the meantime, were frantically trying to locate where we were because we had gone out of sight, and were trying to persuade and request many people to go down and look for us. Finally, there were 4